Most people think they understand expensive cities. They hear a number, they see a ranking, they scroll past a headline, and in seconds, the decision is made. Too expensive. Not worth it. Move on. But what if the real cost of a city isn't the number you see, but the number you never calculate? Because when you stop thinking like a tourist and start thinking like a long-term traveler, the idea of expensive begins to fall apart. Not dramatically, not emotionally, quietly. So why does one of the world's densest, most intense cities continue to appear in global planning spreadsheets, corporate addresses, and long-term mobility maps, even as most travelers assume it should be avoided? What are they seeing that others aren't? Most travelers define affordability as cheapness. Cheap rent, cheap food, cheap transport. But cost of living data doesn't work that way. Indexes don't just measure prices, they measure efficiency. They measure how much infrastructure you receive for every unit of money you spend. Reliability, speed, consistency. When people track real monthly expenses using budgeting apps, something unexpected often shows up. Some cities cost more, but waste almost nothing. Other cities look affordable, until inefficiency quietly drains you. Missed appointments, long commutes, system failures, time disappears, energy disappears, money follows. So when two cities cost the same on paper, but one gives you back hours every week, which one is actually cheaper? Density is usually framed as a flaw. Too many people, too little space, too much noise. But density also compresses distance, and distance is expensive. In dense cities, services cluster, and work, food, healthcare, and transit exist within minutes, not hours. That compression changes spending behavior. You don't budget for a car, you don't budget for fuel, you don't budget for parking, you budget for access. Transit cards replace ownership. Walkability replaces planning. Time becomes the dominant currency. When travelers log their expenses carefully, transport often ends up cheaper than expected, even in cities labeled high cost. So is the real expense the city itself, or the inefficiency baked into other places. Most travel discussions stop here. They compare rent, they compare meals, they compare averages. But long-term planning doesn't stop at averages. It looks at optionality, not where you live, but what stays possible while you're there. Some cities act as junction points. Flights converge. Our financial systems interconnect. Currencies move with less friction. Flight price trackers show it clearly. From certain hubs, nearly every region is one manageable connection away. That reduces repositioning costs. It reduces disruption when plans change. It lowers the price of uncertainty. For travelers thinking in years rather than weeks, this matters more than rent. So how much is a city worth when it quietly keeps your future flexible? Visas are where many plans quietly break. Not because rules are strict, but because they're unclear. Sudden changes, ambiguous requirements, shifting timelines. Some regions operate differently. They don't promise permanence. They don't market dreams. They offer structure, clear thresholds, defined categories, documented processes. Mobility dashboards consistently show this pattern. These systems are rarely the easiest, but they are among the most predictable. Predictability reduces stress. It improves planning accuracy. It allows long-term thinking without urgency. So what's the value of a place that doesn't rush you and doesn't trap you? When travelers compare monthly budgets honestly, this city often ranks near the top. Rent stands out. Space looks limited. Numbers feel intimidating. But when those budgets are adjusted for transportation efficiency, for healthcare access, for safety, for currency stability, for international connectivity, the effective cost shifts, not dramatically, not magically, but enough to cause hesitation, because suddenly the city isn't cheap. but it's controlled. Fewer surprises, fewer disruptions, fewer emergency expenses. And control is valuable. So when did travel planning stop being about low prices and start being about stability? Housing is where emotions enter the conversation. Small apartments, vertical living, dense neighborhoods. But housing doesn't exist alone. When accommodation platforms are filtered properly by transit access, walkability, building quality, and service proximity, the calculation changes. You trade square meters for location. You trade size for systems. Some people reject this trade immediately. Others see efficiency. The city doesn't hide this reality. It doesn't pretend space is abundant. It presents the trade clearly. So how much space do you actually use, and how much do you pay to store emptiness? Lifestyle costs rarely appear in rankings, but they show up in spending logs. Some cities encourage constant consumption, status signaling. As social pressure, endless novelty, others quietly disappear behind routine. Payments work, transport runs on time, services rarely fail, there's no performance required. Expense tracking apps reveal this subtly. Lower impulse spending, fewer emergency costs, more predictable months. Not because life is cheaper, but because it's smoother. So what happens when a city stops trying to impress you and simply functions? Travel narratives love extremes. Boom or collapse, freedom or control, winning or losing. But long-term travelers notice something quieter. Regional gravity shifts slowly. Trade routes adjust. Business hubs rebalance. Mobility corridors expand. Some cities sit at these intersections, not as symbols, as infrastructure. They don't ask where you're from. They ask what you're doing. Mobility data reflects this neutrality. So for planners, neutrality reduces exposure. So how valuable is a place that doesn't require allegiance? At this point, many viewers expect a conclusion, a verdict, a ranking, a recommendation. But serious travel analysis doesn't end that way, because cities aren't destinations. They're tools. For some people, this city is too dense. For others, too expensive. For many, unnecessary. But for planners who value system reliability, international access, and long-term flexibility, it remains relevant. Quietly, persistently, without asking for approval. So why do some cities stay important without trying to be loved? Travel planning isn't about chasing value. It's about understanding trade-offs. Every city charges you something. Money, space, time, energy. The mistake is paying without knowing what you're buying. When travelers slow down, I remove emotion and compare data calmly. Cities like this stop being confusing. They become legible, not perfect, not permanent, not universal, but useful, for the right moment, in the right plan. So the real question isn't whether this city is worth it. It's whether you understand what it offers when you look beyond the headline price.